I continue to see signs that a lot of these guys got caught, as we will dig into. But perhaps more importantly, it looks like the Federal Reserve is being caught by the market. Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Mark is here with you for Arcadia Economics on a rather wild morning in the financial markets. I mean, things have been building for days, weeks, months, decades, but some interesting things happening today, especially at the Federal Reserve, which we will dig into after a quick look at the silver market. And before I begin, I'd like to thank Kuya Silver, run by David Stein, who you've seen on the show several times. Hopefully we'll have him on next week because he is building the next high margin silver company. He is down in Peru. And certainly with the way the Fed is printing and the things that are happening, as we will now dig into, again, just to determine whether it is appropriate for you or not. That's a decision you'll have to make. But certainly, I've really enjoyed getting to know David, how he handles things, which, as you're about to see, is quite the opposite of the Federal Reserve. And before we even dig into, oh, wow, watch Powell and Yellen speak live to Senate. I wonder if that's, if they're offering testimony. I continue to see signs that a lot of these guys got caught, as we will dig into. But perhaps more importantly, it looks like the Federal Reserve is being caught by the market. Now, let's see if we can get the CNBC's chart grayed out. But this is really, it started last week. The 10-year note was at 1.3%. That's 26 basis points. I think it began last Wednesday, so not even a full week. And this one, 8 basis points in a day. These are the kind of moves. I remember 8.1 now. Back when I was on the trading floor, you know, you had certain days back in 2008 or so when assets would move a lot. And you would just be like, oh, yeah, that shop just got blown out and news people were getting laid off. I mean, this is also interesting because it sure seems as if the Fed has started tapering, because the only reason the yields were so low to begin with was because the Fed was buying all those bonds. So which buyer has left that all of a sudden, right after that September 15th date which Janet Yellen put out there in one of her debt ceiling letters a little while ago. Now she's changed her date today, the 18th. We'll cover that later, but hey, could this thing turn around? Could the plunge protection team or China do something behind our backs? Most likely that will happen, but nonetheless, quite a rout continuing in the bond market. And quick look at silver before we get to the Fed fraud. Here you can see Ralston Benham. I would say hopefully for his own sake, especially after what I've seen of people protesting in other places, hopefully that man has been arrested and is somewhere safe where he'll get a fair trial, because I know certainly I've shared my feelings on him and things like this that continue on daily, which the CFTC, everyone there swore an oath to protect and serve. I mean, this is just blatant fraud. Where is Ralston Benham? I have reasons for thinking it's at least possible that, you know, I mean, we hear things such as, well, let's go right to Arizona Senate hears of multiple inconsistencies found by election fraud. And actually, if we go back here, sorry to jump around a little bit this morning. Sorry, not sorry. But there was an interesting article earlier today. Let's see if we can find this here. It was about, well, that will appear here in a moment, hopefully. It was about how the White House was considering a new incentive, considers tax incentive to do stocks. They kept referring to Donald Trump as the president. And again, you know, I know everyone has their thoughts, but you keep hearing Arizona Senate hears of multiple inconsistencies found by election audit. Then the CNBC, in that other article, they were actually referring to President Trump. Sorry, I don't have it pulled up at the moment, but if Joe Biden could possibly be removed and he was appointing Benham to be an even more permanent fraudulent official, who knows? There's also, I have had some minimal contact with the CFTC
that has given some cryptic responses at times. We'll leave that aside for now, and just you see things happening. Because, for example, all right, Joe Biden seems like he's got some issues to face. Now, Fed leaders Eric Rosengren and Robert Kaplan to resign following controversy. Now, this is putting it kindly. Dallas Fed President Kaplan said his stock trading distracted from the work of the central bank. Well, that is one way to put it. Disclosure forms showed Mr. Kaplan showed many millions of dollars in trading in stocks and investments such as stock market futures and interest rate funds. While central bank disclosure forms require officials to provide dates for trading, Mr. Kaplan's form referred to multiple dates, and his bank has declined to provide any transaction dates. So if, I'm just saying in my experience in the financial markets, usually when someone is innocent, they're happy to provide those records. Central bank said it would undertake a review of its ethics rules. And Jerome Powell at a press conference declined to voice clear support for the two leaders. Now, who's going to take this review? Jerome Powell. Now, after everything this guy said, do you trust him to investigate his buddies? Who's going to investigate Jerome Powell? How do we know Jerome Powell didn't do the same thing? How do we know Janet Yellen didn't do the same thing? We already know Nancy Pelosi does the same thing. She just puts it in her husband Paul Pelosi's trading account. How do we know Ralston Benham did not do the same thing? Interesting questions that I can ask and make my own opinions about. I'll leave you to decide for yourself. Both men separately arrived at their own decision without being forced to resign by the chairman. Well, that's quite a coincidence. Rosengren announcement shortly before 8:30 said he would accelerate his planned retirement, and that put Kaplan on the hot seat. So sounds like they may have been connected. New York Fed President John Williams, we need to have the public's trust. We need to hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards. They've done the exact opposite of both of those. We stand ready to adopt any changes around financial rules. Well, as you'll find out momentarily, these rules were in place since 1977 when they got caught doing the same thing back then. Face calls for the two men to step down. So maybe it wasn't just that his health flared up right now. Rosengren, I believe. Eric has distinguished himself time and time again during the more than 3 decades of public service, and he's made out quite well financially, it looks like. Rosengren has an unbelievably strong legacy in terms of the way he has led the Boston Fed and also his own personal portfolio. But let's see if that's just a one-off story. Here we see Boston's Fed Rosengren resigns days after controversy about his trading. Now, he had been placed on a kidney transplant list in June 2020. So I've had kidney stones, and by all means, I hope the man is well. But in the article, so far in 2020, we have learned Fed's Robert Kaplan. Okay, here's Rosengren. Let's finish him off here. Been honored to serve in a job where one can be constantly engaged in pursuing the economic and financial well-being of the Fed governors who are front-running it, of the country and New England. I know that my colleagues will build on my fraudulent progress and continue to make a difference in harming the people that we steal from. Just days ago, talking about how undeniable it was the game was rigged based on a recent report of Fed insiders. I'll check that one out later. What this author, whoever that is, learned about Kaplan, active buyer and seller of stocks in 2020. I would have thought he would have been focused on getting the economy fixed, not his own portfolio, especially since I've worked at multiple trading shops. I talked to a friend of mine who still works for a trading operation. I was recommending silver. I don't even think he could buy physical silver without putting in the compliance form. When I was trading on the floor, you had to put in a notice 3 days ahead. So this idea, oh, well, I didn't know, I don't buy that anyway. He's also reported to have purchased and sold lots worth more than millions of dollars. Who knows? Maybe he was one of the ones buying bonds, and maybe he's one of the ones selling bonds now, which would explain why the market is selling off. Let's check back the bond yield again, 1.555. So maybe it isn't even the Fed itself, but just the individual governors that have been front running these things. We'll see, and I'll look forward to reading that report. Here's interesting. Jerome Powell owned millions of dollars in securities like municipal bonds that the Fed, he owned the bonds that the Fed bought in 2020 per CNBC. Fed Chair Powell owned the municipal bonds in question in a joint account over which he had control. That doesn't sound good. Boston Fed President Aaron Rosengren made frequent or substantial trades in 2020, according to Reuters. Bloomberg expounded on Rosengren's trading. I'll look forward to digging into that, noting that he dealt in REITs, real estate investment trusts. That's a fixed income asset. So it looks like these guys were front running the bond market too, if this report is accurate. Now, I would like to know what they were doing in the silver market, what Ross Benham was doing in the silver market. Maybe, I can't imagine that he placed trades when the CFTC was tamping down the price to avoid what could have been a much worse situation. I often wondered, much worse situation for who? What would have happened to the real estate and stock holdings of Robert Kaplan, Jerome Powell, and Eric Rosengren had the silver market continued rising after there was a shortage that these former Goldman insiders, their sponsored LBMA research, even acknowledged. Actually, that was an interesting thing because I was looking at the Bitcoin chart the other day, and it's funny, maybe not funny. The end of January, here's January 27th. That's when GameStop and the meme stocks flared up. There's Bitcoin at 30,000. By February 1st, when silver's moving, look at it. It spikes higher a little bit before, up to 37. Then it just accelerates. By a week into February, it's up 50%. Go a little further, here, 59. Here, 2.5 months later, from the date where the squeezes began, Bitcoin was up over 100%. I wonder if silver could have reacted like that had it not been tamped down. I'm pretty sure I could document Federal Reserve involvement. Actually, I can document it, whether it be admissible in a court of law, what I have yet, but I know clear enough for me. So we know these guys were involved. Let's check their silver trades too. Perhaps some Arcadians out there, Nate, I know there's a couple other guys that have some research time. Maybe you could look in Freedom of Information Request Act. I think that's fair given the abuse of power that's being demonstrated. Made frequent or substantial trades in 2020. I guess his kidney was fine then. So when he was trading it up, his kidney was okay. REITs, not trading in a blind trust, and hold mortgage-backed securities. So while they were hyperinflating the dollar, he made frequent or substantial trades. CNBC also noted Rosengren held between 151 and 800,000 worth of real estate investment trusts that owned mortgage-backed securities that the Fed was buying. He made as many as 37 separate trades in 4 REITs while the Fed purchased almost 700 billion in mortgage-backed securities. Oh, we got Nancy Pelosi next. All right, these people are war criminals, and they should all be tried. And maybe that's what's happening, where you see this. Watch Powell and Yellen speak live to Senate panel on COVID relief efforts. I am going to watch that because I want to see what. Well, let me put it like this: I don't know what Congress and all these guys are up to, but we'll hold our own trial because the evidence is there. Maybe we'll bring we'll let Janet Yellen. We'll offer to let her appear. She declines to show. We'll just do the trial anyway because I have the evidence and I'm going to make it public, and I can use some help. Undeniable proof of Fed's rigged game. That's one of the ones we clicked on. Dallas Fed president to retire early on October 8th, citing trading disclosure distraction. Well, that's so sweet of him. You know, he doesn't want to be a distraction now that he's made millions of dollars front running it. Hey, check this out. Controversy had swirled over industry after disclosures that Kaplan in particular had been executing large dollar trades in big name companies such as Amazon, Apple, and Delta Airlines. Well, that's interesting because I had been heard that a lot of these guys were going to sell this before they finally let silver run to watch out for the NASDAQ crashing. And look, NASDAQ falls more than 1% as tech stocks tumble. So let's say these governors were selling their real estate investment trust just before the bond yield spike, which means real estate prices are going down. And now that they've sold their Apple and Amazon and tech shares, oh, look at this. Amazon and Apple and more tech shares all lost more than 1% morning trading. So, gee, these guys are good, man. They are good. And he's going to retire to not be a distraction so he can focus on how to launder his money through the Federal Reserve System. But he insisted he's done nothing wrong. During his tenure, he's adhered to all Federal Reserve ethical standards and policy. That's because it's a mafioso cult. It's not a legitimate financial organization. It's bullshit. It's always been bullshit. This is breaking news. Yeah, we'll see if Kaplan updates it. Okay. Maybe I'll bet he's updating his portfolio. Hopefully the Justice Department will investigate that. Because here, fortunately, Wall Street on Parade did investigate and found that Robert Kaplan was trading like a hedge fund kingpin for 5 years. Who knows if it's actually longer than that? While president of the Dallas Fed, a dozen legal safeguards failed to stop him. Huh. Let's see if, because Kaplan, he said, you know, he didn't do anything inappropriate. He wasn't just trading like an aggressive kingpin in 2020. He's been doing the same thing for years, while simultaneously having access to non-public market-moving information from the Federal Reserve's interest rate setting, FOMC minutes, and other confidential communications. I believe that's what you call a trader, not just to the country, but to the world. Let's see, there was a few interesting highlights. Unlike other regional presidents and all Fed governors, Kaplan did not list the dates of his transaction for any year of his financial disclosures. He simply placed the word multiple for the specific dates. Well, that would be a felony. Could have been arrested if I had done that while I was at Susquehanna. Fortunately, I didn't. For how the Schedule B transaction part of the form is supposed to be prepared, see this. Each purchase and sale is supposed to be entered on a separate line. So this guy can't even figure out how to enter his own compliance form, but he's gonna print money for the benefit of you and me. In addition to speculating in stock index future, Kaplan has also made tens of millions of dollars in purchases and sales of a litany of individual stocks. Wow, that is so dirty. Now, the Fed did have rules against this very type of speculative trading for decades, but those rules have somehow managed to vanish into thin air. 1977, Comptroller General filed a report, warned Federal Reserve financial disclosures was woefully lacking. Speaking of 1977, that's actually when the government did defaulted 3 times on its treasury bills in 1977. Oh yes, I was reading that in one of my Silver books. And maybe that had something to do. In fact, I can prove from what I read there in that book, that had plenty to do with silver spiking. 1979, it went to 50 in 1980. Would have gone higher had the COMEX and the CFTC not committed their own fraud. So here you can read the very clear rules that this man seemingly intentionally broke. 3 reasons for trade in speculative short-term futures. Audit committee. I hope those guys get busy. There's that one. And actually, wait. Oh yeah, here's the best part. To make sure this is all above board, Jerome Powell is heading the ethics review after Federal Reserve presidents disclose multi-million-dollar investments. But my question is, who's going to investigate Jerome Powell, who owned millions of dollars in securities that the Fed bought during 2020? Maybe that's what Rosty's doing. If Rosty's doing that, then I hope he's free. But otherwise, I think the man needs to be arrested immediately. Fed Powell, now, in case, all right, so here's the guy that I wouldn't trust to do the review. News broke of Powell's inquiry after Senator Elizabeth Warren sent 12 letters to the Fed regional presidents demanding stricter ethics. So there's Kaplan trading Apple and Amazon, selling off to not be a distraction, just in time. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. But who's going to run this thing is Federal Jerome Powell. But I mean, I've been critical of his inflation talk. So let's see if he can give us a straight answer on that. says inflation is elevated, but likely to moderate. Okay. Seems good. Seems like good news. All right, we solved that one. Now here, Fed officials say they see a pullback in their economic support even with inflation cooling. So here, inflation's cooling. But Chicago Fed president says, I think this is Evans, the central bank needs to generate stronger inflation overshoot. Oh, okay. And then here, Fed Chair Powell to warn Congress that inflation pressures could last longer than expected, which would seemingly be in direct contradiction to Fed Chief Powell saying inflation is elevated but likely to moderate, which is kind of fitting considering he's also going to be doing the ethics review for a crime that at least this author is suggesting there's evidence of. Kind of getting the idea of how this Federal Reserve works. This is par for the course. This isn't new. U.S. stocks extend losses as yield spike hit tech stocks. Let's go back, take another look at the bond yield, see how that's going now that, you know, we're finding out what some of these guys traded. Oh, coming back in a little bit, quite volatile there. Take a quick look at the VIX. Wow, up 20% today. That's a handful. If the VIX is up 20%, I wonder what the UVIX is doing. Let's try that. Oh, 13%. Huh. That's why I keep an eye on these things. You know, they don't tell you in the Wall Street Journal that there's ways to check what's happening behind the scenes. So here's the VIX of the VIX, up 8.63%. U.S. stocks extend losses as yield spike hits tech stocks, Dow down 300 or more. Who knows what once the news from Congress hits the trading floor. Oh, and of course, just to wrap up, GOP senators block Democratic bill to fund government and suspend debt ceiling. New letter from Nancy Pelosi. I think she's lying about this October 18th date. I'll bet silver on it. We now estimate the Treasury is likely to exhaust its extraordinarily fraudulent measures if Congress has not acted to raise or suspend the debt limit by October 18th. I say this one will be long over by the 18th. We'll see. It's just a guess. I mean, this woman makes it as confusing as possible, but maybe as the Arizona Senate hears of multiple inconsistencies found by the election audit, therefore forwarding the reports for your office's consideration if you find it appropriate, further investigation as part of your ongoing oversight of these issues. Well, spend a lot of time doing something over there. So we'll see how that goes. Again, if you want to hear new White House plan where they cite President Trump, you can click on that one. And again, I thank you to Kuya Silver, David Stein, running a business in the opposite way of the Federal Reserve, Bethania Silver Project in central Peru. And that's why, especially, I mean, it's absolutely silly that silver is at $22, more than half, less than half of its 1980 high. So we'll find out one day, maybe if Frost and Benham is getting long silver after being short. Who knows? I am talking to a few people today about Freedom of Information Act requests, and I think that would be a great thing to request from the CFTC. If you Google CFTC and then FOIA for Freedom of Information Act, you'll find there's actually a page on their site. I think this would be a good time to use it. If anyone could help me submit some requests for the CFTC, that would be greatly appreciated. And again, I thank you, Kuya Silver, for bringing us today's video. Wild times out there in the financial markets, but I think the nonsense is rapidly coming to an end. We'll leave the specific dates. I'm sure they'll reveal themselves like these Goldman Sachs executives at the Federal Reserve and in the Boys Club have done as well. So with that said, thanks for being here. And to find out more about the new White House tax plan, apparently CNBC has called Donald Trump the president. Well, that video is coming your way now.